How do you think if Roe versus Wade is overturned, how much of an impact is that going to have on IVF and infertility in general?
Right. So let me see if I can get this right here. Um, so there are people, and your wife has kind of, I don't know, fought fought them, or at least encountered with them. I didn't see it myself, but I think on her private account she was complaining about uh, like people like bashing IVF, um, and that's why she kind of stopped talking about IVF on her main. Um, and yeah, I think so. I I think it's possible that some very conservative states could use overturning Roe as an excuse to also ban IVF. So if people don't know, IVF is in vitro fertilization. Both my wife and your wife have gone through it. Um, and how it works is you extract eggs from the mother, you fertilize the eggs with sperm, and then those are grown in a test tube until they reach a certain stage. And if they can reach a certain stage, then those are implanted. That's how that works, right? Now, for my example, we had 8 eggs retrieved, 7 fertilized, 2 actually got to the stage, right? If actually we can plant it both times, right? So we've gone through 2 cycles, um, almost identical. Now, so last time around, we implanted the first one. It didn't pass. It was a miscarriage on that one. The second one's successful, and that is my daughter. Now this time we have 2. So we're gonna be working on implanting one of those. So we have 2 shots at it at this point. So one of the issues with IVF, first of all, some people don't like IVF at all because it's playing God, right? You're not conceiving naturally, so they just want it banned. It's not really related to abortion, but they'll probably use like kind of the logic around anti-abortion to ban IVF, right? So there's a risk that some really conservative states, I don't think Texas would, but it's possible. But maybe like, I don't know, Mississippi or something. Now, the other part is that I mentioned that I had 7 fertilized, 2 made it. And what that is about is that those 5 were fertilized, but they didn't grow to a point where they determined that it would actually make it, right? So it stopped growing, and they don't consider it viable. Now, what some might say is like you got to save those, and you got to try them anyways. But you know, their expertise says that no, they won't make it. So I think some people have an issue with that because it's technically a fertilized egg, so it's a life form, right? But so they'd want you to try to implant those anyways or something. And there's a lot of problems with that because, well, so in my opinion, I trust their expertise. They're not throwing these eggs away simply because they're heartless, right? They want us to have a baby, right? So I trust their expertise that those just aren't going to work and they can be discarded. But some people don't really like that. And the problem with that is, I mean, what are you going to do? So imagine you go through a cycle. You have, like my case, 5 good, 5 bad, 2 good. So what are you going to do first? You're probably going to implant the good eggs first, right? Doesn't work. That doesn't work. And you're going to go through these 5. And think about it. Like, so you have to, if the first time doesn't work, you usually get 2 months later, 2 cycles before you go to the second one, right? Because you want to, clear out your uterus, make sure it's nice and refreshed, right? Before you, so it might be 2-3 months later. So if you're forced to like implant these 5, you're looking at like 2 years of failed attempts, right? Easily to try to go through this store of eggs. So it makes IVF like really impractical. You know what I mean? So yeah. So I mean, it's possible that some states would do it. I kind of don't think so. I think um, those are going to be like the really online people that no one really, or like the really vocal church people. You probably at your church that you've been to, they probably like talk some crazy stuff, and you're like, yes, brother George, that's good. Yeah, 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 have a good one. You kind of walk away like awkwardly. Um, so I don't think that's really possible, but it is something to think about. Like you want to try to like, I don't know, explain. Yeah, IVF does require like discarding fertilized eggs. No, it's not abortion. It's these are eggs that just aren't going to make it. No one's wanting to throw these away. And the other part is like, okay, let's say you get 3 good eggs, right? You implant the first one. Now you have these 2. You are given the option to discard those. Okay, so maybe ban a person from discarding those. But that part is a little bit crazy because like maybe you have the resources for 1 baby but not 3. You always want to, if you have 3 good eggs, that's good, man, because you might have to go through all 3 of them, just to get 1 pregnancy for sure. But what if you get good luck in the first time, you don't have the resources to get the other 2? What do you do? So you donate the eggs? Okay. I personally think it's okay, but some people feel a little bit weird about that because that means like you having somebody else carry your biological child, and kind of it might be a little bit creepy for some people. So,
Yeah, it's like for embryo adoption is basically kind of what you're talking about. How it's like if say for example a couple had 5 good embryos and they ended up using 3, and they said,
yeah,
well, I don't that's good enough.
yeah. I met
I'll have
somebody on Twitter who was one of those. He was an adopted embryo.
yeah.
So it's good stuff. I mean, I fully support it. I don't know how I feel about forcing people to like, give up embryos for adoption, right? Because just because they don't have, also a lot of people who go through IVF, you're an exception, but I'm kind of more typical. A lot of people go through IVF. They're going through IVF because they're old, right? So their first shot of actually getting the baby is probably the last.
Hmm.
So now they have these eggs, and it's not that they don't want to have extra children, it's just that they really are pretty much at their end,
Yeah, and usually IVF is seen as kind of a last resort. I really want to have a
Yeah,
family, and so
yeah,
I want to go through IVF or IUI.
yeah,
They'll go through those, and if it doesn't work out with either of those methods, then they'll adopt, or they just go, well, I guess I'm not going to have kids. There's a lot of kind of different um, avenues that people can go to have children. And so one of the things that I kind of just want to quickly touch on is how when you're talking about like these options because, and I'm sure you will probably know what I'm talking about, is when you're filling out the paperwork and everything like that.
yeah,
One of the things they say is, okay, well, say for example, you do end up with, I don't know, just to throw a number out there, like 6 embryos,
yeah,
and you end up using 3 of them. What do you want to have happen to those other 3? That's kind of what you were kind of talking about too.
right.
And so there were those options of like embryo adoption. I can't remember all of them on the top of my head, but I do know
Yeah,
like
I remember. So it's like one of them. So obviously one is destroy,
right.
um,
Scientific research is
scientific
another one.
research,
Yeah.
and yeah, adoption, and then the other one is just store,
Right. Right.
right? You just store it for a rainy day, right? But this is assuming that you use 3 and you're done, right? So the storing is no longer good, no longer an option for you. Um, yeah, I mean, right now I have 2 embryos in storage, right? Because we're waiting on the next cycle, right? And I think you have one. You have one extra, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, yeah, you have to pay. I had to pay like what, like $20 a month to keep them, you know? So that's like,
Yeah.
you know,
The whole process is expensive. It's not just, and that's another thing too that I want to also talk about is how, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but when people will say, well, why don't you just adopt,
yeah,
thinking that I can just go to Walmart and pick up a
I
kid
know.
for $100 or whatever like that. No, it's, if anything, adoption may actually even be more expensive than IVF. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're both pretty expensive, and it's going to be a lot of money to just.
Yeah, I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I got $20,000 in my pocket. Here you go. Here, I'll just give
there's
it to
also
you.
like a really good chance no one's going to adopt it, right? I mean,
Right.
because like the thing is like, okay, you're going to go to IVF first because you want to have your own child, right? Um, and then if that's not possible, then you're going to look for adopting eggs, right? I would say that I don't know the statistic on this at all, but I would say like I wouldn't be surprised if like over 90% of eggs, like given up for adoption are never, because most people are just gonna try to go, have their own biological kids first, you know.
And
So
they probably don't even want to go through that entire process of from beginning of when you're starting IVF to because you get basically what would happen is and I'm not 100% on this, but it would be like you get all this medicine and all you have to basically do all these shots like cortisone shots. I think
yeah,
I don't know what exactly the name is, but you get all these shots
yeah,
and to basically give yourself a chance for this embryo to attach itself to
yeah,
the uterus wall. That's basically the whole point.
yeah.
And some was like, well, I'll just get one of those embryos that's already been made. That's kind of roughly this like
I
say
think
for
most people who
example,
go for adoption are just gonna adopt an already born kid, right? So
yeah, well,
it's hard
yeah,
for me to imagine that there's going to be a huge market for adopted
that's true. But
embryos.
there's also women who they just really want to experience what it
Childbirth, yeah,
being pregnancy and giving birth. They really just want to experience that, and
yeah,
that's totally understandable. And I definitely get that.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, like there's a lot of aspects to it. It's not just a clear cut black and white. It's this or that, and because there's people out that I've seen where it's well, if you freeze your embryos and you're an evil person, you deserve to go to hell or
yeah,
whatever. I don't know. It's like okay, well maybe and I do not wish this on anyone because it is a grueling, emotional, and even physical challenge. And before all of this was happening, not like Nico and I, none of this was even in our radar. We were thinking, oh yeah, boom, bam, boom. We'll have
yeah,
sex. Boom. It's all, there you go. It's awesome. It's going to be great. No,
yep,
that's not how it works. And that's not how it works for a lot of couples. Like 1 in 8, probably 1 in 7, even
yeah,
of couples experience infertility. So it's not just,
yeah,
so I don't know.
yeah. It's not, yeah, which kind of, yeah, making a baby is not as easy as a lot of people think. So, anyways, um, yeah. So, I think, long story short, with that, I think there could be like a risk, but I think it would be very unlikely for states to like try to ban IVF, even though technically it includes abortion. Um, but they'll probably carve an exception for that. However, that's something that they probably will want to think about in the ruling, and they might actually add that in. So that's kind of where I'm thinking.